I think you'll understand when I say that something.
The reasons for the Beatles' breakup have been attributed to various events, and depending on who you ask, the same rotating cast of reasons pop up, but just in different orders of importance. It's another beautiful day to discuss why the Beatles break up. Kindly like the video, hit subscribe and that bell notification as we tackle all things Beatles with new videos every week. It was a cold January 1969, and the Beatles were seated on a vast, even colder soundstage at London's Twickenham film studios, in the company of the last people in the world they wanted to be with, the Beatles. They'd been trying for days to write and rehearse new material for a scheduled upcoming live show, their first since August 1966, but the task wasn't going well. The only one among them who had any sense of urgency was Paul McCartney. "I don't see why any of you, if you're not interested, got yourselves into this," he said to the other Beatles. "What's it for? It can't be for the money. Why are you here? I'm here because I want to do a show, but I don't see an awful lot of support." Paul looked at his bandmates, his friends of many years, John Lennon, George Harrison and Ringo Starr, and they looked back at him with no expression. Moments later, he said, "There are only two choices. We're going to do it or we're not going to do it, and I want a decision, because I'm not interested in spending my fucking days farting around here while everyone makes up their mind whether they want to do it or not." Paul waited, but he got no response. Again, the other Beatles just stared back. It was far from the worst moment they would go through in those days. The Beatles in their death throes were one of the most mysterious and complicated end-of-romance tales of the 20th century, as well as the most dispiriting. The Beatles hadn't just made music, they had made their times, as surely as any political force and more beneficently than most. Why then did the Beatles walk away? Many blame the Beatles' end on the machinations of Yoko Ono, the legendary love of John Lennon's life, and on the deviousness of Alan Klein, the band's new manager, who was also a favourite of Lennon's, but whom McCartney could not abide. But it wasn't that simple. "I don't think you could have broken up four very strong people like them," Ono said later, "even if you tried. So there must have been something that happened within them, not an outside force at all. Indeed, the true causes were much closer at hand. They had been there for a long time, in history as full of hurt as it was of transcendence. These sessions, for what would become both the film and album Let It Be, had started from an inspired place, but there was too much going wrong by the time McCartney issued his plea. For the last year, the Beatles' partnership had been fraying. The long friendship of John and Paul in particular was undergoing volatile change. Lennon, the band's founder, had in some ways acquiesced to the leadership of the band. More important, he was beginning to feel he no longer wanted to be confined by the Beatles, whereas McCartney loved the group profoundly. It was what he lived for. These two men had been the band's central force. Theirs was the richest songwriting collaboration in all of the popular music. But at heart, the adventure of the Beatles was forged by John Lennon's temperament and needs. He had formed the band as a way to lessen his sense of anxiety and separation, after his mother, Julia, gave up custody of him to her sister and his father walked out of his life altogether. The 16-year-old Lennon first met the 15-year-old McCartney in the summer of 1957 while playing with his band The Quarrymen at a parish church near Liverpool, and was impressed with Paul's facility for playing the music of Eddie Cochran and Gene Vincent. Just as important, the two were also bonded by deep loss. McCartney's mother Mary died of breast cancer in October 1956, and Lennon's mother was killed when she was struck by a car in July 1958. Working together, John and Paul found a new mooring in the world. For a long time, they wrote songs together, trading melodic and lyrical ideas, and even after they began writing separately, each still counted on the other to help finish or improve a song. They were, however, men with strikingly different approaches to making music. McCartney was orderly and meticulous and placed a high premium on craft. Lennon was unruly, less prone to lingering over a song, and despite his cocky front, less secure in his work than his writing partner. The contrast grew even starker as the years went on. McCartney increasingly composed everyman narratives and celebratory calls. Lennon was writing from what he saw as a more authentic and troubled personal viewpoint. Because Lennon and McCartney dominated the Beatles' songwriting and singing, they in effect led the band, though Lennon had always enjoyed implicit seniority. Even so, the Beatles abided by a guiding policy of one man, one vote, which figured significantly when, in 1966, after years of touring, John, George and Ringo persuaded Paul that they should stop performing their music live. For about 3 months, all four went their separate ways, and as they did, John Lennon felt sharp apprehensions. "I was thinking, well, this is the end. There's no more touring. That means there's going to be a blank space in the future. That's when I started considering life without the Beatles. What would it be? And that's when the seed was planted that I had to somehow get out of the Beatles without being thrown out by the others. But I could never step out of the palace because it was too frightening. In August 1967, leadership in and around the Beatles shifted more decidedly after their manager Brian Epstein was found dead in his London townhouse from an unintentional overdose of drugs. Epstein had been depressed for some time, but he remained utterly devoted to the band, and many of the group's insiders felt that it was Epstein who kept the Beatles grounded and protected. I knew that we were in trouble then, Lennon later said. I didn't have any misconceptions about our ability to do anything other than play music, and I was scared. I thought we fucking had it. Lennon soon abandoned Cynthia to begin a serious relationship and artistic collaboration with Yoko Ono, whom he'd met in November 1966. Though Ono has been characterized as an ambitious woman who pursued Lennon indomitably, she went through her hurt and disappointment in the upheaval that followed, losing access to her daughter Kyoko and sidelining her promising art career at Lennon's behest. The press and the fans treated her with disdain. She was called Jap, Chink and Yellow in public, and Lennon sometimes had to shield her from physical harm. All of this judgment certainly fed into Lennon's rage, but it pales in comparison to what developed when Lennon brought Ono directly into the Beatles world. The group had rarely allowed guests into the studio and never tolerated anyone other than producer George Martin or perhaps a recording engineer such as Jeff Emmerich to offer input about work in progress. The one time Brian Epstein suggested a recording session, John Lennon humiliated the manager in front of everybody. But Lennon didn't bring Ono into the Beatles as a guest. He brought her in as a full-fledged collaborator. When the group learned that Lennon and Ono had started using heroin, the Beatles didn't know what to do about it. This was a fairly big shocker for us, McCartney said, because we all thought we were far out boys, but we understood that we'd never get quite that far out. Lennon's new partnership with Ono meant that he and McCartney would rarely collaborate as composers again. Even so, as the band began work on its early double album, The Beatles, better known as the White Album, the uncommon writing and singing skills of both men had never been stronger or more diverse. In contrast to what he viewed as his own sporadic and inconsistent work during 1967, Lennon was now writing at full force, his creativity revived by the relationship with Ono. Such songs as Dear Prudence, Julia, Happiness is a Warm Gun and Revolution were clearly among his best work. Harrison too had flowered. Even Ringo was writing songs. But none of these men was now willing to allow the others to overshadow or direct his work. The most dangerous tensions during January, though, passed between Harrison and Lennon. After being sidelined for years, Harrison now found that Yoko Ono sometimes had a voice in band matters that equaled or even bested his. Worse though, Lennon and Ono were now practicing what was known as heightened awareness, based on a belief that verbal communication was unnecessary between people tuned in to larger truths. Its real effect, however, was to shut down any meaningful or helpful interactions. When crucial issues came up, Lennon would say nothing, deferring to whatever Ono thought, which drove his bandmates crazy. McCartney had developed a serenity about it all. There were only two options: to oppose Yoko and get the Beatles back to 4, or to put up with her. He opted for the latter because he didn't want to lose John. In addition, he said he felt he had no place in telling John to leave Yoko at home. It did, however, always rankle McCartney when Ono would refer to the Beatles without the, as in Beatles will do this, Beatles would do that. Paul tried to correct her. Actually, it's the Beatles, love, to no avail. Finally, Harrison reached a breaking point. Early in the afternoon of January 10th, Harrison and Lennon got into a fight that they had to deny later came to blows. The moment of that confrontation are among the few that Lindsay Hogg was unable to capture for posterity. He did, however, manage to film Harrison apparently quitting the Beatles. "I'm out of here," he said, picking up his guitar. "Put an ad in the papers and get a few people in." All four Beatles met at Starr's house to resolve their differences, but when Ono persisted in speaking out on Lennon's behalf, Harrison walked out. The Beatles finally reached an accord days later, but Harrison imposed stiff terms. No more talk about any major live concerts and no more work at Twickenham studios. Ono, however, would remain in attendance at all sessions alongside John. "Yoko only wanted to be accepted," Lennon said. "She wants to be one of us." When Starr replied, "She's not a Beatle, John, and she'll never be," Lennon dug in his heels. "Yoko is part of me now. We're John and Yoko. We're together." By the time Abbey Road was released on September 26, the Beatles fellowship had effectively ended. On September 13th, John Lennon and Yoko Ono performed at the Toronto Rock and Roll Revival with a makeshift group that included Eric Clapton. The experience convinced Lennon that he could no longer withstand the confines of his old band. A week later, during a meeting at Apple, with Klein, the Beatles, and Ono in attendance, McCartney tried once more to persuade his bandmates to undertake a tour and return to the stage. "Let's get back to square one and remember what we're all about," he told them. Lennon responded, "I think you're daft. I wasn't going to tell you, but I'm breaking the group up. It feels good. It feels like a divorce." There you have it all, guys. Drop a thumb up in the comment section. Don't forget to hit the like and subscribe buttons if you've not done that, and follow us on Instagram and Twitter. The handles are in the description box below.